Best of r/malicious compliance episode 43. A little over 14 years ago, I was almost 2 years into a contract I had signed to be a full-time salaried pharmacist. I was about 5 months pregnant and health-wise was starting to deteriorate. Rising blood pressure, swelling, gestational diabetes. I asked my supervisor about going part-time. She said since I hadn't fulfilled my contract, it was for a relocation bonus of $2,000. I'd have to pay back all or some of it. Salaried I had full benefits, sick days, short-term disability, which is what maternity leave usually falls under, etc. Changing to part-time I would immediately lose all benefits and have to go under my husband's insurance, and basically make no money while out on maternity leave. So I stuck it out. About 2 weeks later, my blood pressure is out of control when in an upright position, so I'm sentenced to bed rest. I got so bored, I read Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince in 24 hours. I also got 4 months plus laying around the house making 60% of my salary on short-term disability. Plus their insurance covered the extra 4 weeks of hospital stay, etc. Contracts up when I get back, boom time. Edit. Still learning how to edit, for spaces. Thank you. Next. Long time lurker, first time poster. Apologize for being on mobile. It's a very long story, and TL. Doctor at the bottom. So, in 2008 I found myself working as an overnight maintenance laborer for a family-owned collection of properties. 2 shopping complex, a winery, a few warehouses, ect. But most of the time, I was working keeping a grocery store built in the late 60s functioning. Worked my way up to night maintenance manager and loved my job. I was getting the kind of education you can't buy. Hands-on electrical one night, plumbing the next, welding after that. All taught to me by 3 men that could build a house, up to code, single-handedly, and we all got along great. It was the first time in my adult life I had real responsibilities and I was respecting myself because I respected the job I was doing. The owners were all people that truly cared about their employees and they proved this when, in 2017, they sold the main grocery store. One of the many things they included in the sale was all current employees had to be offered a new positions at their current pay level. The company that bought us, I won't say their name but think the opposite of dangerous path, does not employ an in-house maintenance team. Something breaks, they outsource the fixing of it. So they really didn't have a ready-made place for me to fit into like the other department managers. The store manager also did not like that I was making $18 an hour, $6 over a new hire rate. Thus began the systematic, what I saw as, harassment and what has been later confirmed to me as standard operating procedure for legally getting rid of someone at this company. Some of my favs include, making my 35-year-old ass a bag boy, joke's on you. I love doing easy work for good money. Writing me up for spending 20 minutes talking to the police about an accident I had seen while returning carts. I thoroughly enjoyed the district manager apologizing to me for that. Cutting my hours down from full-time to 24 hours a week, which is completely allowable. But as the second most senior member in the store, everyone below me has to get their hours cut first. No, you can't force me to take a salaried manager's position. Yes. You can make me a cashier, a position you know I do not want, but you have to give me the $3 pay bump, and on and on and on. In addition to the many broken verbal promises and out lies, I became very well versed on the union rules, my specific contract rules, and how to protect myself. 7 union arbitrations in my first 5 months, all ended in my favor. Meanwhile, the assistant managers love me. I can cover any department because I've done most everything and I'm a quick learner for what I don't know. Anything breaks down in the store, it was falling apart before they bought it. If I can't fix it, I can at the very least make a detailed work request so it gets fixed sooner. I become the go-to cover guy, filling in any position that needs it. Which at long last brings me to my malicious compliance. The store was not doing well, sales-wise. About a year and a half in, they couldn't get a closing butcher, so, the night manager taps me to work in the meat department for 3 hours every night just to close it out and clean it up. In the department there is a bandsaw that's used for cutting meat with bones in it. It's a pain in the ass to clean, so after reading the department manual I realized you were not to use that piece of equipment if you hadn't been trained on it. Now I 100% had been trained on that bone saw. I knew how to take it apart, fix it and put it back together. But that training was with the old company and I had been informed many times that the new company only thought I'd been trained when they had trained me. Perfect. I can close down the bone saw earlier and get it cleaned. If any customer needs me to cut meat with a bone in it, I inform them that I hadn't been trained on that piece of equipment. Shouldn't be an issue. This is late night and the store's not doing that well begin with. I clear all this with the assistant manager. This goes on for months until finally I'm called into the manager's office during the day. Turns out one of the customers I had informed that I could not use the bone saw was a secret shopper. The store manager is writing me up for failure to complete my duties. She's also writing it up as malicious failure. I forget the term they use. It's basically 2 write-ups instead of just 1, and that coupled up with my previous write-up, I was 15 minutes late once. That's on me. Gives her the 3 write-up she needs to fire me, as I have done so many times in the past with this woman. I invoke my right to union representation and decline to talk with her until after I've spoken with them. At this point I'm thinking they can't bust me. I was following the written directions but oh no. It got so much sweeter and so much worse. While talking to my union rep it quickly becomes clear that the butchers are a completely different union. The store is in violation of the butchers union contract by having a non-union employee work that department. So first my union fights the write-up, wins and gets me paid for the 4/5 days I missed off work. They then get me a lawyer who tells me I am not to speak with any store manager in any capacity, due to the butchers union complaint against the store. 2 weeks off, fully paid. For me, I can't very well work at a store where I cannot speak to my bosses. I then get 2 more days off paid while I speak to the various union reps for my testimony. The store is fined. $50,000 is what I was told, for breach of butcher's contract. When I return to work, my store manager does not work there anymore. Her replacement only accepts the job if his bonuses are not tied to the store's overall performance, so he doesn't mind I'm overpaid. As icing on the cake, no one really liked her so I'm damn near a hero when I get back, grinning face with clenched teeth. TL. Doctor, after the store manager finally figures out a way to fire me, it turns out she's been breaking the rules and she loses the store. I keep my job, get almost 3 weeks paid time off and still work for the company. Thank you. Next. Over the last several months I have been sick twice. Once I was out of work for 4 days due to an awful bout of food poisoning which may be the worst I have ever felt, and most recently, I was out of work for a day about a month ago due to what I believe was a stomach bug. Upon returning to work I was told by my supervisor that she is going to need to see more proof that I'm actually sick and not just taking time off for the hell of it. Now, I'm sure I am not the best worker she has ever had, but I pride myself on never missing a day unless I'm in awful shape and I hardly ever take vacation and I feel extremely guilty whenever I am out of the office. Fast forward to 2 days ago. Not sure WTF happened, but I went from feeling completely normal to vomiting uncontrollably in a matter of 30 minutes. The vomiting, and other fun excrements, continued for the rest of the night. My first thought was, fuck. I'm not going to be able to work tomorrow and how am I going to prove how sick I am again? This is when I thanked God for my trusty new iPhone. I pulled up the camera and turned on the video feature and recorded myself vomiting for about 5 minutes before looking at the camera and saying, supervisor's name, I won't be coming in tomorrow. Hope this is good enough proof of how crap I feel. Back in work today and she said she no longer needs proof that I'm ill. Edit. Your standard did not expect this to blow up post. Thanks for all the love. 3. For all those saying I should go to the emergency room. You're either still on your parents' healthcare plan or don't live in America. I'm not a woman so there is very little chance I'm pregnant. Regretting not using the new selfie feature on the iPhone. Back at work now and feeling much better. Thank you. Next. Okay, so where I'm from there's 2 times a year where you can put anything you want to throw out on your front lawn and it'll be picked up no cost. I don't know if it's just my home state that does this or if most states or even countries do this. Where I'm living now used to but doesn't anymore, but that's a basic description of what happens. For kids it's like Christmas because it's common to go to others' trash piles and grab anything you like. One man's trash is another man's treasure, am I right? I've gotten a desk chair, roller skates, toys, DVD players, a mini trampoline, etc. It's always fun to see what you can find. And now onto the story and the malicious compliance. So when I was 12, my mother sold a lot of our things, TVs and such included, and put anything we couldn't or didn't want to sell in storage while she dragged us all over the country for her book tour. We were homeless, living on the road and all that. Anyway, when we finally returned to our home state, we moved into a rental house in a city 4 hours from where we used to live. And then the unpacking happened. My mother had sold the family TV and so stole mine, which I'd purposely kept, and made that the family TV. I was understandably pissed since it wasn't my fault that she'd sold their TV. Why'd I have to give up one of the only big items I'd been allowed to keep? Months went by and then that glorious day came and my siblings and I were allowed to wander the nearby streets looking for hidden treasures. That year everyone had been transitioning from analog TVs to digital ones, so the streets were filled with analog TVs that were being thrown out. Almost every house had one on their lawn. I took my siblings home after some successful treasure hunting and begged my mother to help me bring one of the TVs home. It would have taken very little effort on her part to get the car and drive it to one of the TVs I had walked to and bring it home. We were both used to some heavy lifting, so between the two of us it would have been a piece of cake and free. But she refused. If you want a TV so bad, then you have to carry one back to the house by yourself. It wasn't a challenge or a tone that was in any way positive or encouraging. It was a tone that said, I won't help you and you can't do it alone, so just give up, with a hint of smugness, waiting for me to dejectedly walk to my room in defeat. No way. Fine. Just make sure to hold the door open for me when I get back so I can get it inside. I turned and left, determined to prove her wrong. Yeah, sure you will, she had replied, sarcastically. So I went front lawn to front lawn looking for a good TV. There were many that were way too big to carry and other that didn't have any good way for one singular person to grip them and would slip when I tried to pick them up. Eventually though, about 2 blocks from our house, I found a, still relatively large, TV with 2 grip holds and was square enough for me to pick up. I lugged that thing, arms protesting and back aching, the whole way home and set it down right in front of the door. Knock knock knock. Mum, come hold the front door open for me. The look on her face was priceless. She just stood there, dumbfounded, before I reminded her that I'd only done what she told me to do. I brought that baby inside and placed it on my TV stand, where I proceeded to hook up my DVD player and give my mother a shit-eating grin when it turned on. I had that TV for years until I eventually had to put it out on my own front lawn when I got a digital TV of my own. The funny thing about this though, is that the TV had to be moved a couple of times while I owned it, moving house and the like, and I couldn't lift it again. It was too heavy, and even with my mother helping we both struggled to get it out of the house. Yet 12 years old me had managed to lift it all by herself. The desire to maliciously compliance spiked. My mother gave me a momentary burst of super strength in order to accomplish my task. I still look back and laugh at how my stubbornness and spite empowered me like that. Edit. And it's official. This post about my spiteful younger self's badass malicious compliance is now my top post. Was not expecting that. Thank you. Next. I tell him we don't have a rake to deal with the leaves and he tells me he doesn't care, just get it done. So I grab the smallest broom in the entire shop and start sweeping the leaves into a dustpan. My boss came to check up on me and flipped out. I told him what else was I supposed to use? Thank you. Next. I have 2 quick tales for you. Short, because they're both second-hand and I don't know all the details or much of the fallout. Number 1. My brother was an apprentice at an engineering firm. New apprentices often have pranks pulled on them. For example, requests to go and find some non-existent things like elbow grease and headlight fluid. Anyway, one of the apprentices younger than my brother was told by another apprentice to go to a hardware store for a long wait, hoping to get rid of him for a while. So off the apprentice goes, with a tape measure, and several hours later returns with a heavy object and a receipt for the longest wait he could find. I haven't heard of any other pranks being pulled on him after that. Number 2. This is a much older one from my grandfather, who has been retired for over a decade now. My grandfather worked for a while in the tool shop at a major international aerospace engineering firm. He has many tales from there, but I haven't heard any other of the malicious compliance variety. Anyway, one of the foremen there was a bit of an ass, and was unpopular with many of the workers under him. He would also disappear for several hours every day, so whenever he did, my grandfather's colleagues would take the chair from the foreman's office and shave about a centimeter from the legs each day. When the foreman eventually realized his chair was getting shorter and shorter, he mandated that new legs be welded onto his chair. So they did. The next time the foreman went into his office, he discovered his chair was now nearly 2 meters tall because he never specified how long the legs should have been. He was pissed, but couldn't do anything about it. Thank you. Next. About a year ago, I was working at a local bagel restaurant that made both breakfast and lunch sandwiches. To set the scene, it's Saturday afternoon and we're between rushes. This lady, we'll call her Karen, walks in asking for a takeout order that she's made online. My co-worker on the register doesn't recognize her name and ends up going through the reg to try to find it. After not finding it, my co-worker asks her what her order was and tells her that we'll make it ASAP. She gets angry and starts going off on my co-worker about how she's incompetent and that she's placed it earlier that morning, that she needs to be somewhere soon, and that it must be in there. She apparently was in a hurry. Co-worker goes through the reg again and, again, no online order. They finally get Karen to place her order and it's put on the line. Tuna and chicken salad. Girl wrangled Karen like a pro. I get the misfortune of making the order and Karen is watching me make the sandwich like a hawk inspecting a field mouse. Tells me that one of the bagels is not toasted enough and that the other was burned. They weren't. But I remade them anyway. The next part is really where she reaches peak Karen. To preface, I was always trained to use one gloved hand to hold the bagel and an ungloved hand on the spreading knives. If I was handling meat or fish, it required 2 gloves with exception to tuna and chicken spread because you use knives with those. Anyway, Karen stops me midway though her order and tells me to put on another glove. A bit annoyed with how closely she was watching me and with how she treated my co-worker, I say, oh of course. Put on another glove and wiggle my fingers at her to show the gloved hands. I go back to making her sandwiches. I finish the order and go to hand her bag when she says, actually I don't want those. Get me your manager. At this point I'm more than a bit angry. This Karen comes into the shop, is angry at us the employees because we didn't receive her order for some weird tech reason. Tells me how to do my job, and lets me complete 2 sandwiches before making me get my manager. So I go in the back, tell my manager that there's a Karen waiting for her, not in those words, and go back out with her. I clean up nearby while my manager talks to her. Karen tells her that I was only using 1 glove and that I should be fired. To which she replies that that's how I was trained and that's how the restaurant is run. We've never had a health code citation for anything ever, and if she wants to look through the reports she's more than welcome. To which the Karen backs down and says something about maybe wanting the sandwiches after all. Here's where the malicious compliance comes in. I knew that she was in a hurry to get somewhere, and her sandwiches are still on the counter. I pick them up, make dead eye contact with her, and throw them away. My manager, not noticing that I did this, turns to me and asks about the sandwiches. I smile and say I threw them away because Karen said she didn't want them, and that they'll have to be remade. My other co-worker, one that's been doing dishes, comes out completely oblivious to the situation. I give the order to him and warn him to use 2 gloves and tell him to take his time and make sure the order is perfect. It's not much, but I'm satisfied that I slowed her down.